Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to talk about an important topic, and that is past the presidential election of 2016. My guest is Michaela Papa. Thank you so much. You are the editor of States of the Union.
That's me.
Love the cover.
I do too, yeah.
Did you pick it?
I did. I worked with a friend from high school who actually created that. She's an artist living in Washington State, and so I got her to design it. Yeah.
So you've written a book that is all kinds of reflections of the new president in the White House, yes. Mr. Trump. Pro, con, you've got poetry in there, you've got creative writing, you have all kinds of responses to this precipice that the U.S. is on, if you will.
Yes.
Where'd you get the idea?
So the idea came from people really felt like they weren't being heard. Regardless of what their political thoughts were, what their opinions were, they felt like they weren't being heard. And I wanted to create a platform where people could voice their opinions, whatever that may be, and express themselves however they saw fit.
How did you get the idea, though? You were sitting around and the presidential election happened, and you said, you know what, I need to just see what people are thinking out there.
Yep.
Of all age groups. Yeah, pretty much.
That's about it. That was the extent of it.
So how did you gather stories and photos and art and poetry from across the country?
It was hard. It was a lot of just shouting into the void, trying to get everybody's opinion. So that was sort of the hardest part of this, was making sure that all voices were represented, all perspectives from all sides.
Did you do it online? How did you?
Yes, so we posted a lot of calls for submissions on like writers boards. We did Facebook posts, Instagram posts. We sent out emails to colleges all over the country, and they sent them out to their students and their English department and so on and so forth. And so it was a lot of word of mouth, a lot of internet, I'm friends with a lot of writers who are friends with writers who are friends with people who also have opinions. So it was a lot of that.
And you took this in over a period of how long?
That's one of my favorite things about this book is, so I created the website 2 days after the election, and then started taking submissions from then. So we were open for submissions from November 16th about until early February. So this was all basically the time between the election and the time of the inauguration. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of speculation, right? So if people were really excited, or a lot of anticipation at the time. So
well,
I wanted to capture that.
It's a divided nation. It definitely in these times.
Yes.
Were you surprised that were you getting more pro-Trump, more anti-Trump? What were you getting? What were you seeing?
One thing that I also liked about doing this project was it wasn't so black and white. And with this election, I'm sure everybody knows that it's not so black and white. It wasn't just pro-Trump or anti-Trump. We sort of got everybody in between, was like the Bernie supporters or the people who didn't vote because they just couldn't cast a vote for anybody running, and everybody fell in between. So that was a great
It seems like you were just passionate about getting this out there. When you got some of the poetry, what did you think? Because I read some of the poetry, and it's about not so much even politics. It's about where we are as a country, what we're thinking going forward. There's a lot of stuff in this book.
Yeah, I was so surprised with how honest people were. They were so raw in what they were writing and creating. And one thing that I really liked was that people who weren't necessarily writers, they would send me an email, and in their email they're like, I've never written anything before, but I really needed to write something. I've never written a poem before, but here's a poem that I wrote. And so it was great to read that.
What did you learn by getting all these submissions in from all over the country?
That people should write more. It's just such a great way.
It's all about the written word, right?
It really is. And also the art, people were creating art. We had some collages sent to us. We had just every different medium. People were trying to express themselves. Whatever they were feeling, they wanted to preserve, and then we wanted to preserve that as well.
And how did you whittle it down to put what you put in this book? A pile that would be, you know, I know you said it's not pro-Trump or anti-Trump, it's a lot of things in between, but how did you put all of that in one book? How did you decide what to put in there?
That was hard to do.
Because there are a lot of, there's artwork, there's pictures, there are stories, there are poetry. women's movements, all kinds of things.
Yeah, so we took all the submissions that were sent to us and then we scrubbed them of all the identifying content. So we didn't know who was doing it, who was sending it to us. And then I read through all of them and I assembled a team of editors who also helped me cull through the hundreds of submissions that we got. And then we all voted and then we spent hours and hours debating on the merits of everything that was sent to us.
Are there more books to come that are like this?
People keep asking me that. I don't know. So I work as a teacher and I've worked as an editor before, but this was really rewarding to work with so many people who had a voice and they just weren't used to sharing it. They didn't know how to express themselves. And so working with those people to figure out how they wanted to say what they wanted to say, how they wanted to present their feelings, how they wanted to share their artwork. That was a really rewarding
And this is
process.
for young and older, we should say. It's not just millennials that put stuff in here.
Right, no. I think the youngest is 7 and I think the oldest is 86, something like that. So we really span the spectrum.
Was there something favorite that you got? A piece of writing, a poem, a piece of art that you were just struck by that?
All of the artwork really resonated with me just because people were so, it seems like they spent so much time to figure out how they wanted to share what they wanted to share. I love the artwork in here. We had some photos sent to us as well that were really great. The poetry, we got a ton of poetry. That was by far the largest submissions.
Were you surprised by that?
I think that because it was such an emotional thing, a lot of times when people think emotion, they are sort of more drawn to poetry, as opposed to nonfiction or fiction. Fiction, we had the fewest submissions, I think.
You wrote a submission as well at the front of the book.
I wrote the introduction, yes.
And did you get to say exactly what you wanted to say, or would you say something different now that we're in March of 2018? Would you say something different?
I wouldn't. I dreaded writing the introduction, really dreaded it. Put it off for as long as possible because I really didn't know how I wanted to say what I wanted to say. I kept waiting for this like aha moment, like, oh, we all want the same thing, but it never really came. And so I had to write the introduction with the anticipation that eventually there will be an aha moment. We will all understand each other. We will all be happy.
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome?
I mean, maybe in the second book, you know?
So what would you do with the second book? Would you do the same thing? Would you do something different? Because this is a lot of work.
Yes.
You may not have written every word in here, but you took it upon as something very emotional, and you felt compelled to get it right, because that's what we do when we put books out.
Right.
So what would you do?
What would I do differently if I were to do a second book? I would try to do more interviews in person and really get out and sort of travel more to interview more people. One of the hardest parts of this book was getting a fair representation for everybody. And we strived so hard to get that representation, but if I were to do a second book, I would want even more to reach more people, and maybe not people necessarily who would have heard of us. So I think traveling would help that.
You could get a YouTube channel going.
This is true.
What have your students said to you? Did you show it to your students?
No, they don't know this exists.
They're going to now.
They will.
They will. In this point in our country, and you're so passionate about what people have said to you, would you ever think about elected office to change the things that you're not too crazy about?
That's a good question. I honestly have not considered that. I think of myself in such defined roles that all boil down to, I'm a storyteller. I just love stories. And I think that hearing people's stories and sharing people's stories, if that were a way to best share people's stories, maybe, but I've never considered it. I'm more interested in the heart of politics than the mechanics of it.
Well, I have a friend who runs the Yale Campaign School for Women who would say, sign up, because we need more women's voices.
This is true.
So you should think about that. As you go out and talk about this book to libraries or wherever that you're headed, what are people saying to you? Are they asking you lots of questions? Are they saying, oh, well, you're anti-Trump or you're pro-Trump? Or, I mean, people are so passionate right now about their politics.
Yeah, that was a hard thing to navigate, was sort of how to talk about this book, how to listen to people who, not because I was hesitant to listen, but because people are hesitant to share their political opinions, just because it's such a polarizing thing.
Very polarizing, and I think prior to the election, people didn't say who they were voting for. They just wouldn't say.
Right.
It was a very interesting time, and I'm a lot older than you are, but it was palpable how people weren't saying, or on the other hand, people were saying. I mean, it was really an interesting time in that election process.
That was the other reason we wanted blind submissions for all of these, so that people could feel like, even if I knew them or they knew one of our editors, what have you, that they would be having a fair chance, that their name would be removed from this in the judging process.
How long has the book been out?
The book came out January 2nd.
So let me ask you this, as the author of 2 books, when that book came in the box and you opened it up,
oh, I just kept touching it.
Oh, exactly,
and then I smelled it because it smelled like a new book. There's nothing better than the smell of a new book.
There's nothing like it.
Especially when it's your book.
Right, and so I wish you luck, and I think that you have more stories to tell because these times are changing so quickly. And I appreciate you coming on, and good luck with that book.
Thank you. And
States of the Union.
States of the Union. And we'll be at the Yale Bookstore on Friday, April 13th. I'll be doing a reading there.
Good luck on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela.
Thanks.
Spend all night kissing, and if Walter's right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing I could find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of my mind. Just to save time, skip right ahead to the last ride.